Okay, yeah, this is my uncle Bob Boulder. That's what we called him. My cousin Bobby was their oldest son, and Ethel Allen. She died in 1999. I didn't know when she died. He died in 1997, apparently. Anyway, that Ethel was my dad's sister, and Mom was his sister. So that's probably another reason why we were here in Pinedale. And again, this is where my dad and my mom are buried. Anyway, when my dad died, he died in Provo, Utah, and they had the funeral there. And Bill Ward put his casket in the back of his wagon and drove it up here. And halfway up here, he ran into a storm, and it took him almost 2 days to get up here. Well, it took him all night long to get through the storm. When I and Lena came up, I imagine some of you kids were here. We came right up here because we were ahead of the storm. You can see Dad died in 1998. He was 88 years old. He was born in 1910. My mom she died in a nursing home. I was with her when she passed. Anyway, we came up here. She wanted all our kids' names on the back. So I guess you can say I got my name on a tombstone already. My other uncles, the other Ted Allen, I think are moved over there, or buried over there, and some of the more Boulders are buried over that way, but I've never been over there. We could go over to the roster or whatever it's called and see where they're buried. But the other thing, way over here in the pine trees, if you want to walk over there, is where I think it was my dad's grandpa was buried. His dad was buried in Rock Springs because that's where he died when they lived there. Anyway, we found the gravestone. It's a real thin, real square, about this tall. And what was it, 4 years ago? We came up here and put a gravestone on his wife's grave because it never had a gravestone. It's kind of an interesting gravestone because it has a picture of her, a ceramic picture of her on it. Yeah, much to my chagrin, I couldn't tell you where they were born, but there they are. Joseph Reuben Boulder, he was my grandpa. I used to borrow his tools. I want to hear a story there. I borrowed a hacksaw from him. I don't know what I was cutting. And I found, boy, that's the neatest saw in the world. It'll cut iron bolts. And I wonder if it'll cut this pipe. And I went over and started hacking on the fuel oil pipe to our stove inside. Oh, sure enough, it cuts. I don't remember. It sprayed all over, and I don't remember. Nobody ever blamed me for it because I'm sure Rube knew that I had the saw. But anyway, this is my grandma, Bertha Greeno Boulder, and I'm surprised that she's buried up here because she passed away in Provo, Utah. So I guess they brought her up here to be buried next to her husband. But like I was telling Rob as I was walking by, a lot of these names, I remember the people. Pape, that was my first grade teacher. And you see these names. Failer, I think Failer's owned one of the big stores downtown, and that's probably one of the stores that Dad had a charge account on. It was really funny. I needed a spark plug for a gas engine I made and I was working with, and I just went over to the hardware store and said, I want to buy this engine. And he says, who's going to pay for it? I said, charge it to Dad. And he says, okay. And so I got the spark plug without having to pay for it. Anyway, now we're going to walk over where I think it's my great-grandfather was buried. Okay, again, here we are at Lewis Allen's gravesite. And if he died in 1930, Dad would have been 20 years old, and they weren't married yet. So my grandpa on my dad's side died when he was in the 8th grade. He died of liver failure, or kidney failure. This is my dad's grandpa. That's my great-grandpa. And this is my great grandma. And as you see, it's Helen, Emma. She was to go by Emma. Emma Parsons. So she was a daughter to Doc Parsons that settled in Browns Park. It was called Browns Hold back then, but it's called Browns Park now. And Doc Parsons was part of the Cattlemen Association in Denver, and then they moved up. They wanted to homestead, I guess, up to Browns Park. And as a matter of fact, he had the only ferry across the Green River. The Green River goes through Browns Park, and he'd charge so much a wagon and so much a horse and so much a person to go across that ferry. And in the fall time, you didn't need it. You could ford the river. But in the springtime, that was the only way you'd get across that river. So he died in January 13. She died. So Dad was only 3 years old. Yeah, that's right. I remember, I've got pictures of Lewis Allen with a whole team of horses and wagons and everything on their way from Rock Springs, probably Browns Park, down to Kemmer, down to that way, someplace, going up to here to Pinedale. Yeah, I didn't bother to take you, but there's Allen houses. Well, probably not anymore, but there's sites where the Allens, Paul Allen and Helen, all these people had homes here in Pinedale. I guess that's why Dad moved up here, because a lot of his aunts and uncles lived up here. But you see that gravestone for Helen, Emma, is new. We put it there maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I don't remember exactly the year. But this one is original.
So what did he do for a living, Lewis?
I don't know. What little I know of him is he moved up here and I don't know what he did.
He only lived to be 51, Rob.
Yeah, my grandpa, Will Allen, that's Lewis. Will Allen is my grandpa. He, like I say, died when Dad was 18 or so, or in the 8th grade or whatever, and he was running a trucking company. And I didn't give a picture of him and his truck, but if you search the pictures that I've given to everybody, you can see him in a truck with culverts and no way to get in the truck. But he had about 3 or 4 trucks, and when he died, my grandmother had to sell all his trucks to pay for the doctor bill and, living and all that stuff. And then she moved up here, I guess.